Does an artist make enough money to support himself and his art? It's a good question without a definitive answer. The internet has certainly changed the game, granting creators access to more fans and resources than ever before. Kickstarter, the crowdfunding platform, was once known as a spot for emerging artists and has become a resource for established creatives too, including filmmaker Stanley Nelson. He is an Emmy Award-winning MacArthur genius who's launched a Kickstarter campaign to crowdfund his documentary on the history of the Black Panther Party. He is joined by Kickstarter CEO Yancey Strickler to discuss artists and their changing relationship with money and fans. The Atlantic's Hanna Rosin is here to lead the conversation.
Hi, everyone. So we're going to talk about both Kickstarter and Stanley's film. The first obvious question I have for you, Stanley, you haven't used Kickstarter before, and you did for this film. Can you tell us why?
Well, I think that's two questions. Why I haven't used it before, and why I've used it for this film. I think that Kickstarter is something that you don't want to just jump into lightly. That it's a real commitment that you have to make, and so we haven't had to use it before. And this is a film that we just completed on the Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution. And as we approached funders to help us get the film out there and help the film's theatrical release, we got this kind of, the Black Panthers, I don't know if I want to fund that.
From who? From big funders?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
From foundations and other people who had funded other projects that we do. And we realized very quickly that, the traditional methods of funding were not going to work for this film, and we had to think of other ways to get the theatrical release funded.
That's so interesting. So it was because of the subject. Do you think, if you had done a film about Malcolm X, I wonder how to test the edge. Martin Luther King is fine. Right. Malcolm X, maybe. The Black Panthers, no.
I think that's probably
right.
About it. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And then, so you put it out there, and how quickly did you know that it was going to be, if it was going to be successful? How much did you know about what you were doing?
We knew a lot going in. I mean, I think that's one of the keys to Kickstarter is we got as much information as we possibly could, and that ranged from Kickstarter itself to other filmmakers. We talked to a ton of different people about it. And our goal was $50,000. And I don't think we knew that we were going to make it until we got to 50,000. I mean, you're very nervous the whole time. Am I going to make it? Am I going to make it? Am I going to make it? But we did. But you're nervous. But the nervousness is a good thing. It drives you. It makes you think of new ways to reach people, and I think it's a good thing.
Now, Yancey, when in this process of you go to Kickstarter, you get advice. What are the tips? What do you say to someone like him? He's established, so he's not a new and struggling artist. He may be struggling, but he's not new. He has a recognized body of work and a name. So what's the advice to someone like Stanley coming on?
For anyone, Kickstarter is it's a vehicle for sharing an idea and telling a story. And for us, to help someone just be very sincere and express their enthusiasm to the platform is the most important thing. There's very basic things like video is very important, demonstrating your work, offering people a way to become a participants in it by, say, going to a premiere or having their names in the credits, things like that are quite important. But at the core of it is someone who's passionate about an idea. And so what we try to encourage people to do is to have the confidence to put their ideas out there, to spread them far and wide, and to trust that good things will come of that. And, to date, it really has proved to be the case.
So do you use the fact that the Black Panthers are too hot to touch as part of creating a community around the fundraising? like we are so cool that we can get behind this, and the money men can't? Is that part of the pitch?
No, that wasn't part of our pitch. Although I think it was implied. It's implied. I think there's a lot of people, who support the Panthers and want to support the Panthers, and in that way wanted to support the film project. And those ranged across the board. I mean, I can't tell you, how many, people my age, white folks my age who were part of that time, who remembered the Panthers as being something very different from who they have been portrayed in the media. How many people, those people came to us? How many young people, came to us? I mean, it was just an incredible experience. I mean, I had people that I went to grade school, would dig me up, and and because we mined every single list that we could possibly find, kids, parents who were on my soccer team, contributed. So it connects you to a whole bunch of people that we wouldn't have been connected to.
But the idea of a documentary about the Black Panthers still being something too hot to handle or something to have anxiety about as a traditional funder, or as a larger company looking at it and looking at that property and thinking that is not something that's going to make us a lot of money. And for that reason, the idea of being less viable, that is the cultural funding world that we have long lived in.
That's what
and
Kickstarter is for, right?
Yeah, well, what we're for is the idea that a project should exist just because people are enthusiastic about it. And the demand that a piece of art or a cultural good has to make someone else money, and that is how it justifies its existence, is morally wrong. So the notion that an artist and a group of people in the world wanting something, wishing something to exist, is enough of a justification for it to happen is at the root of the whole thing. So, yeah, a film about the Black Panthers is a very, very perfect example of that.
Although there must be lines, I remember there were controversies even 2 years ago, like lines you can't cross.
Sure.
Right? Like some things are too far. Like Stanley on the Black Panthers is not too far because he's handled these subjects before. But you guys have had to face that in the past, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a platform of scale, and especially as a site that takes governance and takes those things very seriously, that really tries to operate with a moral code and a high degree of integrity, we invite that sort of criticism. And yeah, of course it happens. And it's interesting to think about the Black Panthers as a historical artifact as something very different of the Black Panthers as a living, existing thing. And so those things create very different contexts in how you think about things. But yeah, those questions come up all the time.
So, okay, Stanley, you now have funders who you see at soccer practice or wherever all the time. What is that relationship like when something is crowdfunded as opposed to funded by a couple of more wealthy donors? What does that mean for your film, for your excitement about the film, for your accountability? How does that change the dynamic?
Well, I mean, we're still living, and I should say to everybody, our Kickstarter campaign ended 2.5 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. I think 2 weeks ago today, actually. So we're still just living it, but the connection is very different. I was at an outdoor restaurant 2 days ago, and this guy walks by and goes, "We did it!" And I'm like, "Wow!" And
did you know the guy?
I kind of knew him, and I kind of knew what he was talking about, but and he said something else. I realized definitely it was Kickstarter, and so there's this connection that you get to people who hear about it. That's much different. They're part of the film now, and also you reach a huge bunch of people that you wouldn't normally reach, who now know about the film, who might not have supported the Kickstarter campaign, but they now know about the theatrical. They know about when the film will broadcast on PBS. They know about all those things, and so they also are connected to the film. So it did so much more than raise the money that we were trying to raise, and a lot of it we kind of knew going in, but we really didn't, and we learned as we went.
Are they allowed to have opinions about the film? Is that a complication that comes up? Where
no opinions.
You've got to say, you can't say this about what the FBI did to the Panthers or what happened in Chicago, or you can say this. Do they then start to talk about that?
Well, most of them, they haven't seen the film. And so, but no, I think that hopefully they'll just be supporters of the film. I mean, no, we're not looking for feedback from 50,000 or 100,000 people.
No, but that's what I would think would be the complication with fundraising like that, is that they have a stake means they have a stake.
But when you have an average amount that someone's pledging of $25, there's a limit to how much someone will care or what sort of voice they feel that they deserve. So we see people try to solicit feedback, and there are those sorts of things that happen. But no, I mean, for us, it's incredibly important that creators always retain complete creative freedom over their works, and it's a prerequisite of being a part of this.
But in reality, look, if you contributed $10 and you want to, 6 months down the line get in on a dialogue about the film, then that's all good. I mean, the more we're connected to the people who see our films, the better. I mean, because a lot of times as a filmmaker, you literally work in the dark, and you have no connection to the people who see the film. I made a film years ago that went straight onto television. I never saw it with an audience, and a year later, I happened to be at somewhere and I saw it with the audience, and I didn't really even know, when people started laughing at a certain part, and this woman came up to me crying at the end, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know any of this. I had no connection to the audience whatsoever.
Is his experience typical?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly common. I mean, we certainly know that people know that a Kickstarter project is quite a big deal. It gets a lot of attention on the web. We are one of the 300 or 400 most visited websites in the world. It's a very large platform, and so people do a lot of work up front. People are incredibly well prepared. And what we see repeatedly is that the amount of time that people invest in it is equals the return they get out of it. But all the things that Stanley is saying, the themes are things that we hear frequently. And so, it's not the sort of thing that, you can just wake up one day and do and have a magical amount of success, but that's the same with doing anything creative. There's a process to getting there, and it's one that works quite well. I mean, it's $1.7 billion has moved through Kickstarter to independent creators over the past 6 years. So it works very, very well.
I've always wondered, as Kickstarter's been growing, its self-identity as a kind of haven for artists. But as it's grown, the business press gets really interested in technological innovation that happens on Kickstarter. I'm going to beat Apple down or whatever, that kind of attitude, or video game innovation. Has that changed the nature of the community when it's moved from arts to an awesome cooling?
Yeah, well, I think as a growing enterprise, our community is always changing. It should. We don't want to fit people into certain molds. Things like the sort of technological projects like you're talking about actually make up less than 10% of what happens on Kickstarter.
So most of it is like a film, or
the two prototypical Kickstarter projects are someone raising $10,000 to make an album and someone raising $20,000 to make a movie. Those are the two most common projects. But of course, a project raising $20 million, or a project winning an Oscar, or a project being bought by Facebook, are interesting news events. So that colors a lot of the perception. But if we look at the makeup of the site and the diversity that we have on the platform, 15 different categories, all of them receiving millions of dollars every year in funding, it's growing in very healthy ways from our perspective. But we are very conscious of that arts and creative focus. I mean, that is where we come from, that is who we are, that is why we exist. And so that continues to be the mission that we follow, and always will be.
Stanley, can I ask you about the film?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What do we misunderstand about the Panthers? What did we get? So you interviewed people who haven't been interviewed before. We have a totally fixed idea, and I'm sure that it's bifurcated fixed idea depending on class and race, what we think about the Panthers. But what does the film kind of reestablish about the Panthers that history has kind of washed away?
Okay, so first, I don't want to presume too much, because one of the things that I've found about this film more than any other film I've worked on is everybody comes to it with their own whatever they bring about the Panthers.
They were cool, they were criminals, wherever you fall.
And that doesn't break down on racial lines or age lines. Most people have some kind of opinion about the Panthers. I mean, I think that what the film is about young people who are mainly teenagers, who for whatever reason felt that they could change America, and America needed to be changed. And I think that's what's important. I think that, we misunderstand. The Panthers have come down to be, a bunch of black people, mostly men, with guns who hated white people and wanted to kill white folks. And in the film, you see viscerally in other ways that the Panthers, had supporters across the board. You see Eldridge Cleaver speaking in the audience is 95% white. You see Asian carrying signs that say Mao Zedong says free Huey Newton. You understand also that J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI went at the Panthers with everything they had to try to destroy the Black Panthers, and also to try to turn, and they say this in memos very clearly, to try to turn the rest of the country against the Panthers, and they did. The Black Panthers made a lot of mistakes, and they weren't right about everything, but I think we have to relook and reanalyze that history, and it's important that we do. And also, look, the Panthers look cool and talk cool, and there's a lot of fun stuff about the 60s and the early 70s that is just kind of fun.
Was there any surprising bit that you discovered, like an FBI document, or I don't know, something that you were like, it was that bad, or it was that good, or it was that cool, or anything that gave you an impression? I
think J. Edgar Hoover and the fact that they put all this in memos, that they had, J. Edgar Hoover wrote memos about, we have to set the Panther spouses against each other, and they would write letters, to somebody that says, your wife is sleeping with this person or that person, and just crazy stuff that they did to try to destroy the Panthers. And that's not only the shootouts that they kind of engineered. And there's an incredible scene in the film where there's a shootout in L.A. Between the Panthers and the police that went on for 5.5 hours. And the press got there because it went on so long, and they didn't, for whatever reason, they didn't keep the press back. So you actually see this shootout, and we interview cops who are outside, we interview Panthers who are inside, and it's just this incredible scene, to see a inside and outside of a shootout, on American soil.
Well, you should all go see it. Thank you for making it. Thank you for allowing it to be funded, and thank you all.